सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Sir Ivan Menezes, born in 1959, who just passed away, was a wonderful man. I might have met him socially a couple of times, but did not know him personally at all. I definitely did not or couldn't have gone to school or college with him because not everybody came from thereabouts, from that level, from that stratum of our society at that point of time. About his many qualities, attributes and achievements, I read in the wonderfully touching obit by his batchmate economist Arvind Subramanian. In fact, he rose to be India's chief economic advisor. This appeared in Business Standard last Thursday. I am sharing a link to the column with you in the description of this video. I take all of them, all of the compliments, all of the praise to be true. It is just that I was momentarily intrigued by the obit writer's concluding assertion that Aristotle would have envied Ivan. Now, why would Aristotle envy Sir Ivan, who rose to be the global boss of Diageo, the big liquor company? I thought hard, and then the penny dropped. Of course, silly Aristotle never got to go to Delhi's St. Stephen's College. If only his parents had had the wherewithal to send Aristotle there, he might even have featured in the 1979 batch of economics honors graduates from St. Stephen's College who grew to rule India and the world. As we are reminded, that batch gave us Sir Ivan Menezes, a global corporate star, eons before Indra Nooyi, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai and so on. It also gave us our Chief Justice, D.Y. Chandrachud, and one of his senior brother judges, Sanjay Krishan Kaul. From the same batch as these judges also comes probably the most expensive lawyer to prolifically appear before them. That's Abhishek Manu Singhvi. Then there is World Bank Chief, World Bank boss Ajay Banga, infrastructure guru Vinayak Chatterjee, and so many civil servants that if I listed their names, I'd risk walking into the dangerous realm of plagiarizing from the obit. This is not a piece of satire. This is just my window to look back at what India was, where it has come from, where it has reached, and where it is now headed. The India that this class of 1979 walked out into looked very different from what it is now. Check out the demographics of the successive batches in the All India services. The Indian Institutes of Management, the ranks of the top judiciary, and corporate leaders. You will struggle to see the success of that batch repeated in even a fraction of that measure by any other after, say, 1989. I'll give it 10 years after 1979, not after. That's how India has changed. In 2003, in a national interest piece headlined The HMT Advantage, I had noted the rise of a new kind of elite in India, those coming in from Hindi medium type, therefore HMT institutions. That piece was sparked by the death of astronaut Kalpana Chawla, who we discovered rose from modest schooling from nondescript Karnal to become a NASA astronaut. And Karnal, a place so nondescript in Haryana, that I had to introduce it by saying that this is a place that is, say, 20 miles short of Kurukshetra, 20 miles south of Kurukshetra, and 20 miles north of Panipat. At least Kurukshetra and Panipat are both famous or infamous because of the big wars fought there. That piece had also noted that already the top leadership of our politics, civil services, armed forces, corporates, judiciary, even the media was no longer the preserve of the old establishment elites. That it no longer mattered where you came from, how well your daddy had done, what clubs and networks your family was linked to. These had stopped mattering even 20 years ago when that piece was written. We note now that Ivan Menezes' father was a distinguished civil servant and chairman of the railway board. I picked that also from the obit. Therefore, the obit reminds us he had the perfect pedigree. Pedigree, you said? Mukesh and Anil Ambani, however, went to a Gujarati medium school near the Mumbai Chawl where Dhirubhai, then a small-time trader with a humongous fire in the belly lived. That school was so nondescript that it probably doesn't even exist anymore. Did anybody ask them their pedigree? Now, what changed in India so radically that the elite networks of the not very distant past, or say from my generation's growing up years, lost their predominance or preeminence? They haven't disappeared and never will. New elites will rise to. It's just that the network has grown so rapidly and so humongously with India's economy and society that now it is impossible to identify such golden batches from any golden institutions. This transformation and expansion can primarily be traced to 1991, the first phase of economic reforms, and then several waves thereafter. As long as the economy was small and growing slowly, the few privileged institutions sufficed to produce the talent that India needed, from corporate boardrooms to the civil services and the judiciary. Now, a rapidly growing economy needed many more talented people and a much larger catchment area. St. Stephen's, Doon, Mayo, St. Columba's, St. Xavier's, La Martiniere, I borrow all these from the Obit. These are still great institutions. They may be India's finest even now, but they are just too few to meet India's need for talent. That's why a Tata Administrative Service equivalent today needs to go way beyond these institutions. Family networks and checking the names of the candidates' fathers. The desperate, slog 24/7 push of the middle, lower middle, and poor India, meanwhile, has made it much more competitive to crack the UPSC examinations. Track the lists of toppers and rank holders published by IAS academies when you open your full front pages now, and check if there are any from these old hallowed institutions. It is just too hard to compete, and even in the interview process, there is no premium on pedigree. The biggest, most visible and audible, that's important, audible change has been how people, especially employers, stop bothering about how you spoke the English language, your diction, pronunciation, even grammar in some cases. Nowhere is this change more pronounced than in the last bastion of English elitism, the armed forces officers' mess. For 3 decades now, most new officers have come from rural, small town and non-elite backgrounds. A very large number are children of former other ranks or JCOs. Listen to them talk now. They no longer sound like the old BBC. We can see this change across the border too. Pakistan's current army chief drew some smirks and much sniggering on social media by pronouncing pleasure and measure. Pleasure and measure in a conversation with his Chinese counterpart the way that many non-convented Punjabis might. Player, Mayer like that. And that led to a lot of sniggering by the Pakistani upper crust. But I am sure none of his peers in the Pakistani GHQ or among the corps commanders knew the difference. They didn't bother. And do the Chinese care how you pronounce pleasure and measure? The short point is, we live in a world radically different from what it was for the 1979 economics honors batch of St. Stephen's College. Nostalgia is a beautiful thing, and we old-timers are entitled to it. I am also reminded of an op-ed piece a couple of years ago by another illustrious graduate of the same college, and among our finest users of the English language, so good that I envy him all the time. That piece was ruining how the world had changed, for the worse in his view, of course. They were touching memories of the time when everyone wore simple jeans, had innocent jam sessions at college, when all your parents had one Fiat or Premier Padmini car, and the family had no greed for more. How wonderful was that era, and how much better and virtuous compared to the greed-ridden, overly ambitious one now. This genteel era was one when only the hallowed, once successful generation, just about a few thousand families maybe, were able to send their children to India's Etons, Oxfords and Cambridges. That was just the volume of talent that India needed. And the 30,000 cars that India produced in a year is also all that the country needed or deserved. How immoral, unvirtuous and shameful, how materialistic, how low class these times must be if we produce more than 4 million cars and yet there are waiting lists. We were satisfied with 30,000. Why can't cars be left to those who deserve them? However great those times may be to reminisce about, they aren't coming back. You can hear it in the voice of Mukesh, जाने कहाँ गए वो दिन, याद है आपको, remember? और किशोर कुमार, कोई लौटा दे मेरे बीते हुए दिन, और मोहम्मद रफ़ी, याद ना जाए बीते दिनों की, और better still from S.T. बर्मन, सचिन देव बर्मन, राजा गए, ताज गए, बदला जहाँ सारा, रोज़ मगर बढ़ता जाए कारवां हमारा. Those supposedly wonderful old times are now over. And India's caravan is gathering pace as it moves on, looking more like a juggernaut pulled by tens of millions of supremely talented Indians that our best old institutions are too few and too small to have produced. I don't believe Aristotle would have a problem with that.